Good morning, everyone, and thanks all for joining us for the launch of the Phase 1 Insights paper of the International Dialogue on Climate and Trade. I'm Jason Bordoff, a professor here at the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia and director of the Center on Global Energy Policy. And it is a real pleasure to be with you all virtually this time as we take stock of the first phase of this dialogue and we look ahead to what comes next. When we launched this initiative about a year ago, our goal was quite simple but also ambitious: to create a space where governments, experts, and stakeholders could come together to unpack a set of emerging and contentious issues at the intersection of climate and trade. And in the past year, the dialogue has done just that. We have had workshops in Brazil, Singapore, South Africa. We've convened policymakers from over 20 countries across every region of the world, along with partners from business, from academia, from civil society. And these conversations have revealed both the tensions, but also the opportunities at the nexus of climate and trade. They showed how green industrial policies are reshaping the trade landscape and how the resulting frictions pose risks to countries' climate, economic, and development objectives. But these conversations also underscored a shared recognition that cooperative approaches that better align climate and trade can be a powerful force for accelerating a global clean energy transition, mobilizing investment, and ensuring that the benefits of decarbonization are more equitably shared. The Insights paper that we are releasing today distills the key messages from those discussions. It doesn't pretend to offer all of the answers, but it does highlight where there is emerging common ground and where further dialogue is most urgently needed. It's also been encouraging to see how this initiative has already helped catalyze new efforts elsewhere. At the event we held during Climate Week here in New York just last month, Brazil's COP30 president, Ambassador Delago, spoke about how the dialogue helped inspire Brazil's forthcoming international forum on climate change and trade. I want to say none of this work could have been possible without the extraordinary engagement of the governments and stakeholders who participated, nor without the support of our funders, and particularly want to thank the BMW Foundation. And of course, this is just the beginning. As we look ahead, phase 2 of the dialogue will build on this momentum. We'll be bringing together a smaller group of participants for more focused and in-depth discussions to move forward from diagnosing the issues and establishing common understandings to exploring concrete, actionable pathways for cooperation. I want to thank all of you who have contributed to this effort so far and invite you to continue to be part of it as we work to bridge divides and build a more inclusive, sustainable global economy. I want to thank my colleagues, Elliot Diringer and Trevor Sutton, as well, for all of their extraordinary work on this effort and this dialogue. And with that, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Trevor, who directs our Trade and Clean Energy Transition Program here at the Center on Global Energy Policy, who will be moderating today's panel. Thank you.
Hello there. I actually think before we turn to our panelists, Elliot, you'll be offering some insights from the paper that we have recently published, distilling the findings from our 3 dialogues. Is that right?
That is right.
Okay,
Thanks.
and I will kick it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor, and thanks, Jason. If you'll all give me a moment, I'm going to attempt to share my screen here with the PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully that's coming across. And it is my pleasure at this point to present some of the key insights that emerged in the first phase of our climate and trade dialogue. As Jason said, we launched the dialogue just about a year ago with the aim of providing an informal space for governments and stakeholders to look for common ground on cooperative approaches that could more effectively and more equitably manage issues at the intersection of climate and trade. We convened A series of regional workshops, teaming up with local partner organizations, held workshops in Singapore, Brazil, and South Africa. We had more than 100 participants in all from 22 governments and from academia, think tanks, the private sector, labor, and civil society. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our co-sponsoring organizations. In Singapore, the National University's Center for International Law and the MTI Academy. In Brazil, the Brazilian Center on International Relations, also known as SEBRI, and the Columbia Global Center, Rio de Janeiro. And in South Africa, TIPS, Trade and Industrial Policy Strategies. And I want to echo Jason's thanks to our funders, the BMW Foundation and Breakthrough Energy. Before getting into the takeaways, would just like to note that the workshops were conducted under the Chatham House rule, though participants did agree to be identified, and you'll see their names in the report. Also, the report we're releasing today represents the views of the authors. It doesn't necessarily represent the views of individual participants or the co-sponsoring organizations. Turning then to the takeaways. We start with the broadly held view that trade is an essential enabler of climate action. We can't achieve our climate goals without leveraging trade. But climate and trade are now colliding, largely as a consequence of growing climate ambition. As major powers pursue green industrial policies to drive decarbonization and to grow low carbon industries, other countries worry that the resulting trade impacts may unfairly disadvantage them in the net zero transition. This, of course, is all arising against a global backdrop of increased fragmentation, weakening trade norms, and deepening geopolitical rivalries, often tied to national security agendas. Climate trade tensions not only arise within, but have become deeply enmeshed with this broader geopolitical context. Green industrial policies may be as often instruments of economic and national security as enablers of climate action. There was a clear sense in the dialogue that the actions of the Trump administration, especially its weaponization of trade, are amplifying some of these underlying trends. But there was also a broad recognition that the climate trade tensions will remain a class of issues that countries will have to address regardless of the course of broader events. At a very high level, our discussions contemplated two broad pathways. In one, climate trade tensions continue to escalate, triggering a retaliatory spiral that impedes green trade flows and winds up undermining climate action, as well as many countries' broader economic and development objectives. In the alternative scenario, countries devise cooperative approaches that ease climate trade antagonisms and actively leverage trade to accelerate climate action and to position more countries to share the benefits of the clean energy transition. It was clear throughout our discussions that the tensions building around climate and trade are in part a manifestation of long-standing frictions between developed and developing countries over climate equity. Anyone familiar with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and its evolution over time knows how potent these issues remain in the climate negotiations. There are differences over precisely what principles should apply at the climate trade nexus, but there was a sense that beyond broad principles, resolving equity in this space will require a much closer consideration of practical issues and options within given contexts. Conflicts between climate and trade have begun playing out in their respective multilateral settings. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the World Trade Organization. In the UNFCCC, the last two COPs have included bitter fights over whether to place so-called unilateral measures on the negotiating agenda. In the WTO, issues at the climate trade interface are the focus of both discussion and formal complaints of unfair trade practices. The general sense, though, was that for different reasons, neither of these forums is likely to produce any meaningful resolution of these issues anytime soon. Outside the UNFCCC and the WTO, countries have begun taking up related issues in plurilateral and ad hoc forums. They are undertaking joint analysis, outlining new principles, even establishing binding commitments. Some examples include the Climate Club launched out of the G7, the G20 Principles on Trade and Sustainable Development, a number of new initiatives launched by BRICS countries, and a new binding agreement among a handful of countries called the Agreement on Climate Change, Trade, and Sustainability. Participation has in some cases broken down along north-south lines, but there was strong interest in the learnings these efforts can offer and the directions they may point. Three of the takeaways you'll find in the report speak to specific climate policy challenges. The first is carbon accounting. This wasn't initially on our agenda, but it quickly became clear that working toward comparable methodologies for carbon accounting is an essential foundation for stronger cooperation on climate and trade and for accelerating decarbonization more broadly. The worry is that at present, the many differing and sometimes conflicting accounting approaches that have been introduced are creating new barriers to trade by increasing the cost and complexity of market access, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. The second policy challenge is figuring out how different carbon border measures can work together, what we call interoperability. As the first out of the gate, the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism has drawn most of the attention and most of the heat. One consequence, though, of CBAM is that a growing number of countries, both developed and developing, are adopting carbon pricing policies, and some are considering carbon border measures of their own. Here, too, a growing patchwork of differing approaches could further fragment trade, raise costs for business, and hinder the flow of clean technology. Some form of interoperability is needed to ease compliance, avoid new trade barriers, and maximize climate benefits. The third policy area is green standards. And again, here too, there was concern about the proliferation of different approaches. There was also concern among developing countries that standards developed in the north don't take into account regional differences. So, for instance, don't adequately credit sustainability assets like biomass fuels or nature-based carbon removal. But there was also a sense that coordination on the use of sectoral greenhouse gas intensity standards to help decarbonize key sectors could offer a promising avenue to align climate and trade objectives. Private sector participants said that greater consistency and rigor in the application of standards would help justify their sustainability investments by ensuring that products earn the green premium that they embody. When we step back to look at these issues from the standpoint of policy architecture, there was, of course, a broadly shared view that ideally solutions could be fashioned within the established multilateral order. But given the fractured state of global relations and the particular obstacles faced within the WTO and the UNFCCC, there was also a broad sense that an overarching multilateral resolution is unlikely in the near term. What appeared more feasible is a growing mosaic of bilateral and plurilateral efforts among different and perhaps overlapping groups of countries. These efforts could arise from a convergence of economic or strategic interests within a region or among like-minded countries, and they could tackle different aspects of climate-trade relations. In this scenario, there would not emerge a single architecture, but multiple architectures that can inaugurate and extend shared norms and practices. And if successful, such an approach could helpfully inform and, over time, form a stronger political foundation for broader multilateral frameworks. Our final takeaway addresses what many dialogue participants viewed as an essential next step: a neutral forum where governments can come together outside formal negotiating processes to deepen mutual understanding of both challenges and opportunities, and to seek shared principles and cooperative solutions. Such a forum would ideally bridge the climate and trade disciplines as well as North-South groupings. Rather than a new standing institution, it could be an interim space for open-ended dialogue, and any outcomes could serve to inform existing forums or provide a basis for new intergovernmental agreements or initiatives. Such a forum may now be taking shape. Some of you may have heard, as Jason referenced, Ambassador Andre Delago, the incoming COP30 president, at a climate event week we co-sponsored, where he shared Brazil's plan for a new integrated forum on climate change and trade. We look forward to the forum's launch next month at COP30. We also hope that our international dialogue on climate and trade continues to provide a productive space to seek common ground on cooperative approaches at the intersection of climate and trade, and we look forward to sharing the results of our further discussions. I want to thank you all again for the opportunity to share our initial takeaways, and with that, I'm going to hand back to Trevor, who will introduce our distinguished panel.
Excellent. For some reason, I think because of the shared slide, I can't see. Oh, here we are. Okay, good. So you can all see and hear me. Great. Well, thank you, Elliot, for that overview of the Insights paper. I'd encourage everyone to read the paper. It's not terribly long, and it is now available on CGEP's website, and I think is also linked to in the email that went out about this event. So we have an excellent panel of three distinguished government public servants who all participated in the phase one of the dialogues and represent countries or governments that are reflect quite different, but nonetheless overlapping, I think, positions geographically and in the role in the global economy. And so I'm going to start with Eloisa Pereira, who is a special advisor to the Minister for Environment and Climate Change, particularly on matters relating to the upcoming COP30 in Berlin, which is just next month. So, Eloisa, Elliot mentioned Ambassador Delago's announcement at New York Climate Week that they're going to be launching an integrated forum on climate change and trade at COP30 this month. And so I'm just wondering if you could reflect a bit based on your participation in a workshop and your work in setting the stage for what is certain to be a consequential COP on, what are the big opportunities and what are the big challenges facing the trade climate nexus and the possibility of international cooperation in that space.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, Elliot, for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here. And I must say that you did a fantastic job, Trevor, Elliot, and Victoria, in compiling this report and compiling in such a organized and satisfactory manner the views of so many different participants. This was just a tough exercise, and it leaves us in a space where we can think about the next step. So I agree with Elliot that we started from the richness of this first phase of the group was to find out where we are today, where is this place where trade and climate tensions have deepened and have broadened. So we started 10 years ago with just like disputes on green subsidies. And right now we are in a situation where you have just like a broader range of topics, and the report brings this out. So we have not only green subsidies, we have green sustainability standards, we have carbon standards, we have export restrictions, export bans. We are in a situation where just like the complexities involved in trade and climate tensions are more acute. And we see this happening not only at the WTO, but also at the UNFCCC. And the solution for that, Elliot also mentioned in his first remarks, is just like that it's identifying the reports and identifying the different discussions that we had just like throughout this last month is cooperation. So what type of cooperation? Cooperation on the development of a common carbon standard, just like not a harmonized standard, but a standard that just like taking into account the particularities of different energy mix and also direct production process. We need cooperation on means of implementation. So this was something that developing countries mentioned time and time again. Green standards are costly, and because they are costly, we need just like we need finance. Developing countries have tight budget, and they don't have many times, and I see this in Brazil. They don't have sometimes the technical capacity to implement all the systems, be it just like MRV systems for measurement, reporting, and verification of carbon standards. And I imagine just like developing countries that are even poorer, just like in terms of capacity than Brazil. So this is a concrete area and a concrete space that developing countries need to comply with green standards, be it just like green carbon standards or green sustainability standards related to forests. So we do need cooperation on means of implementation, on development of green standards that really take into account in carbon standards, not only the direct production process as we have today, but also the energy mix, because we cannot talk about carbon leakage if you're talking about different energy mix. So this is something that I reiterated in all my intervention, because this is some important point. Of course, countries are worried about carbon leakage when they impose a carbon price. This is a concern in the EU, this will be a concern in Brazil when the carbon pricing system is operating. This is a concern in any country, because there is also recognition that the energy transition and the green transition is costly and then impacts the industry competitiveness. But when we talk about carbon leakage, we need to start from the right premise, not the wrong premise. We cannot have carbon leakage if we're talking about an exporting country that has dirtier energy mix than the importing country. We can only have just like carbon leakage if you have as dirty or dirtier exporting country with a dirtier energy mix than the importing country. Because when you talk about carbon intensive products, we are necessarily talking about energy intensive products. And the energy infrastructure is essential in that equation. And this has been reiterated time and again by the IEA, IRENA, and we have IEA participating in the discussion. So this brings us to Trevor's question. So what is the relevance of this integrated forum that the Brazilian government is launching now in COP30? So this brings us to this third space, which is how can we resolve the tension, the trade and climate tension? And Elliot mentioned it came out in the discussion that this is the space for resolution of conflicts have also changed. So before we used to see that the discussions around the WTO dispute settlement mechanism, which is not functional anymore, and necessarily everyone needed to just like find a new space for this resolution of conflict to happen. And what we see is a proliferation of bilateral and plurilateral initiatives. These initiatives mostly are just like for discussions and just like developing roadmaps, developing solutions, developing principles. We have the G20, we have G7 Climate Club. We have some agreements that just like surround the WTO, like the agreement on climate change, trade, and sustainability between New Zealand and 3 other trading partners. We have discussions happening at the OECD. We have different type of arrangements, formal and informal, and the result of this is just like we have more transparency. of what the situation is, what's needed. And the integrated forum is one additional space in this space of a response to the trade and climate tension. And the important point for this forum is the fact that it's outside the WTO and the UNFCCC, and this allows countries just like to find concrete solutions, because indeed when we are now when we were in pre-COP and then in Bonn, we saw that every discussion that brings out trade in the climate space, it's very contentious. Nobody wants to talk about trade, and countries say that trade is a topic that should be discussed at the proper forum at the WTO. And when we are at the WTO, it's the same thing. Nobody wants to talk about CBDR. CBDR is a climate principle. It shouldn't be just like affecting trade discussions. So there's one point that Ambassador Correa do Lago mentioned in New York, in the New York Climate Summit, is that this is a common feature right now in both the WTO and the UNFCCC. And if you're inside the discussions, you see that this action happen. So it's important to have an outside forum, just like forum outside of these two spaces, but it's also important, and it's actually extremely relevant to move from this discussion space, deliberations, finding roadmaps, to concrete actions. If you don't find concrete action, just like to resolve trade and climate tensions, business will be the worst affected, plus people. So it's not only business, people will also be affected. The situation that we have today, we want to foster cooperation, but actually each jurisdiction is actually unilaterally thinking about their own industry and how they will be affected by climate mitigation commitments, because they are costly, they impact competitiveness, and they want to find a way to develop standards that fit their national industries needs. So this is clearly the situation. Each one is going their own direction unilaterally, and if countries do not sit, especially major countries, because they are not only the ones that emit more, but the ones with the biggest economies, with trade more. If they don't sit together and come out with just concrete cooperative, just like actions, it's going to be very difficult for the climate, for the businesses, and for people. And the integrated forum on climate and trade that the Brazilian government is proposing can fit this gap.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're all very much looking forward to see how the integrated forum launches and its substantive agenda as it kicks into gear into 2026. So I'd like to turn now to Jake Worksman, who is a principal advisor on international aspects of climate policy at the Climate Action Directorate of the European Union. Jake, the EU has really been a pace setter on issues at the intersection of trade and climate. In ways that, in many ways, have defined a lot of the debate around this set of issues in various multilateral fora. And as Eloise mentioned, I think there's both an urgency and a desire to cooperate around this set of issues, but also often when trade is brought up in a climate setting or climate is brought up in a trade setting, it can become very contentious. So from where you sit, where do you see the most promising avenues for deconflicting a lot of the conversation around this set of issues? And is there a particular place where you think they should happen or could be most productive?
Thanks a lot, Trevor, and thank you to Jason and to Elliot and to the rest of the team, including the partners around the world that have helped get this project going. It's been incredibly rewarding experience for me to be involved in it. I'll be reacting to your question in my personal capacity rather than representing the EU at this meeting. As some of you may know, I'm currently on an academic sabbatical at the NYU Law School, where I am studying these issues. And while I remain in the negotiations for the EU, I'd prefer to make my remarks personal at this stage. It's a great set of questions, and I really appreciate the insights paper and also being able to hear Eloise's reaction to it as another participant in the process. I think that there are two observations that I would highlight as being most promising in terms of the way forward that are reflected in the Insights paper. And that lead me to be a little bit more upbeat, maybe, about the potential for near-term meaningful conversations and meaningful outcomes than some of the Insights paper suggested. And the first of those observations is about the importance of carbon accounting and the need to improve convergence of the way in which different jurisdictions that are starting to put in place trade-related climate measures towards conversions. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that carbon accounting, measuring the intensity of the production processes, the carbon intensity of production processes of traded goods, is a kind of a red thread that runs through many dimensions of trade-related climate measures. And so getting a better understanding of how different jurisdictions, but also different sectors, the private sector has been very engaged in this process for many years, have been approaching this challenge is a very promising avenue to travel down. The second is the observation in the Insights paper of the spread of carbon pricing. And Eloisa mentioned this as well in the context of Brazil. More and more jurisdictions seeing this as a cost-effective way forward of getting their emissions under control. The combination of a clear cap, but with the flexibility to achieve emissions reductions cost effectively. But then with it, this interest and concern around the risks of carbon leakage and the need to address carbon leakage through measures at the border. So I think those are the two elements that I think would be important to continue to work on through the ongoing project that we're discussing here, but also through other forum, a number of which have been mentioned. On the first point, I think it's important to look at this issue of carbon accounting and the need to improve interoperability across two related continuum. The first is, what is our goal in terms of increasing the degree of convergence? Are we looking at a world in which we are perfectly harmonizing the extent to which we are accounting for carbon and measuring embedded carbon? Are we looking for some form of mutual recognition that helps us to reduce frictions by not so much accounting in exactly the same way, but recognizing that the way in which we're accounting can be recognized by more than one jurisdiction, even if it's different? Are we looking for interoperability or convergence, as some have suggested, or is the best that we can hope for in certain circumstances an improving of the understanding and transparency around the way in which we account? And I think the answer to those questions will be different across a different kind of continuum. And that's the continuum of the way in which carbon accounting is being used. And I would say at one end of the continuum, there is the basic empirical question of how many tons of carbon are produced, for example, through the manufacturing of steel following a particular process, where I think that there is a high degree of potential to move towards a harmonization of approach. I mean, these are fundamental empirical questions that should be answered in an answerable in a pretty straightforward way. But as you move along the continuum from the empirical towards questions around how different policy approaches can better interface, and so the question was raised already by Louisa's comments about what's the appropriate scope of emissions to account for in the context of any particular policy choice that a government is making. I think the question of interoperability becomes more complex. It's not simply an empirical question, but it's a question, for example, in the context of adjusting for carbon price at the border, of who and how much is being paid by which actors in the application of that policy. So if you're looking to level the playing field between an installation in the EU and an installation in a third country, you would look to see how much of the carbon price the installation in the EU paid. Did they pay for scope 1, scope 2, scope 3? And you would only adjust for that. Whereas if you were applying a government procurement policy where you were interested in the entire production process of a good to determine its carbon footprint, you would certainly, in the context of something like steel, look beyond Scope 1 emissions to Scope 2 emissions. And if you were thinking about circularity, you might even look at Scope 3 emissions as well. But that's, I would say, in the kind of in the middle of this continuum, from empirical to policy interface. And then there's a third dimension as well that's raised by some of the principles that have been pulled together in the context of carbon accounting, which is I would say, is the more political. Do you take into account when you're accounting for carbon, for example, the level of development of the country that has produced that particular product? And to me, that's probably the most challenging of the spaces in which you can discuss how much can we converge, how much can we promote interoperability across this kind of continuum of choices, from the empirical to the political. So I think that this is an area that is worth exploring in a more complex way. And that turns to the second point, the spread of carbon pricing and the interest in addressing the risks of carbon leakage, and where I'm becoming more optimistic that there might be some near-term meaningful conversations that can be had to reduce some of the frictions in this space. The more we have practitioners working to solve similar problems across jurisdictions, the more we can have, I think, conversations about how we can pragmatically resolve these differences where we can, understand where these differences will remain when for example, our policy choices can't be reconciled, or our political understandings can't be reconciled, and to focus on where we can solve the problems. And that, to me, will be made more promising the more countries participate in the design of these policies themselves, and are therefore encountering these questions and these trade-offs within their own political economies in relation to their own industry concerns and competitiveness concerns of the kind that Eloisa rightly raised. So those are the two main takeaways, I would say, from the Insights paper that leave me a little bit more optimistic that what is often characterized as friction or clashes between trade policy and climate policy can actually be seen as an integration of these two fields into the formation of policy that reconciles the need to keep markets open, keep markets fair, but ensure that those markets are promoting in every way they can a transition away from fossil fuels and towards the net zero goals that we've all signed up to. Thanks very much. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. And it is a welcome positive perspective from you. And yes, I should say that although all three of our panelists, like many of the participants in the dialogue, do represent their governments, I think one of the things that was so refreshing about the dialogue was that people were able to take off their official hats and speak more in their personal capacities, where they have tremendous intellectual resources to bring to bear on this set of issues, as Jake has just demonstrated. Well, and so that brings me to our third panelist, Peter Govindasamy, who is Director General for Negotiations at the Singaporean Ministry of Trade and Industry. Peter, you helped co-organize our first workshop. You have been with us from the beginning. We have heard about the potential for conflicts around this set of issues from Eloisa. We have heard a cause for optimism from Jake, particularly building out from shared technical understandings and cooperation. I'm wondering if you could react to those two and give us your sense of are you more optimistic or pessimistic about the ability to achieve international understanding around climate trade issues?
Thanks, Trevor. Thanks. Good to see all of you. Let me first join everyone else in congratulating the Center for the job well done. I think it was a successful dialogue. Having participated in the dialogue in Singapore, I can attest to the statement in the report that discussions assisted all of us to deepen collective understanding of issues at the trade-climate interface. And we also were able to identify some pathways for cooperative action. Let me begin by offering some perspectives, and that will also relate to your question, Trevor, respect to the second phase with points that all of us, with some of us, if not all of us, can trade-related climate actions are essential enablers to address the climate emergency. So in this regard, I want to react to a point in the report which says that some countries perceive trade-related climate measures as green protectionism. I think we need to dispel that notion. Trade-related climate measures are necessary. So the issue is one of how do we make them WTO and UNFCCC consistent. So in fact, we need robust trade-related climate measures if we are to reach the net zero targets of the Paris Agreement. Second, issues in the trade climate nexus, I agree, pertain to the WTO and UNFCCC regimes. However, having participated in these issues at the WTO and the UNFCCC for the last 20 years, I fully agree with the statement that the issues do not fit fully nor neatly in either forums. Third, while there is scope to continue discussions at the WTO and UNFCCC, but I mean, as a negotiator involved in both processes, I can also agree with the statement in the report. There is actually little expectation that both regimes can deliver tangible outcomes in the foreseeable future. Fourth, I think we can also agree that the climate emergency requires proactive and urgent response. So we need to clarify the rules in the trade climate nexus. So that brings to my next point. So I think the idea of a neutral forum for open-ended dialogue is compelling. I think we need that in my view. Such a forum, drawing on relevant expertise of experts with the relevant trade and climate background, operating on Chatham House rules, should seek to develop shared principles and cooperative solutions, norms as well. This would be, in my view, useful reference points to enact initiatives at the WTO and the UNFCCC. Specifically, I think the outcomes from this forum could also be taken up in the KCI, the Katowice Committee, which is mandated to analyze, assess, and report on cross-border impacts. So this is one material contribution that this forum can make to the UNFCCC through the KCI and the Forum on Response Measures. By no means exhaustive, let me highlight three areas which, in my view, the neutral forum should consider. Jake highlighted some areas, Alicia mooted other ideas as well. In my view, the starting point will be the forum should try to give impetus as to how parties can give effect to the mandate in Article 3.5 of the Convention. I'm referring to the first sentence, the first part, to promote an open and supportive international economic system. So what concrete initiatives that parties can take collectively, cooperatively, to give effect to this obligation? So in my view, one of the things that this forum can discuss is how can parties refrain from raising new barriers to energy efficiency and zero or low emission removal technologies such as hydrogen, CCUS, energy storage. I'm just citing some examples. I think that will be that will contribute positively to the discussions on having climate ambition. Second, the forum also can analyze how can parties with abundant renewable energy options facilitate the trade of such renewable energy to those that lack them through regional grids. I think the notion of regional grids is going to become even more important as we all move towards the 1.5 target and net zero ambition. Last but two other points. Often we talk about goods. I think we should not forget that goods cannot walk. They need services, as negotiators say. So what are the services that need to be liberalized to harness the potential from trade-related goods which are necessary for climate actions? So we should not forget the other part of the coin, which is services. Finally, I think the adoption of international standards is important. So the forum can also discuss how parties can be encouraged to adopt relevant international standards. So having said that, I will just make one other point. It's great that the Brazilian presidency is thinking about the integrated forum. Moving forward, I think we need to also see how can both processes can be rationalized that we are talking about here. and the integrated forum that will be launched at COP30. So certainly there will be synergies. So we need to harness the synergies, but avoid duplication. So thanks. I've got other points, but I thought I'll leave it at that, and happy to interact and discuss. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I'm going to step in here because Trevor needed to step away to join his next event this morning. And just wanted to note that our fourth speaker, Joanne Yawich of the South African presidency, unfortunately wasn't able to make it due to a flight cancellation, which gives us a little extra time. I wanted to ask each of our speakers if you want to just take 1 minute more to offer any reflections based on what you've heard from our other speakers, and then I'll offer some closing reflections. Eloisa, please go ahead.
Thank you, Elliot. I would agree with Jake that just like the integrated forum, climate and trade could work on these two topics and clarify them further. But it's important that the forum do not replicate what we already have. The forum, to be successful, does need just like to move forward. We need to just like to think outside the box, to be creative, and think how to just like solve these tensions that have become just like more and more just like notorious in the last years. So it's not only about carbon standards. I think this is a very important topic. We have sustainability standards. We do have just like the green, the definition of green goods. So everything, we have just like some incomplete work that has been done, and the forum could add some value on that space. On the green goods, we've been discussions. We have seen discussions in both at the WTO, especially at the WTO, the TES and the Committee on Trade and Environment, that just focused on technology, on green technology for just like renewable energy. But green goods are more just like it's a concept that's more ample than simply technologies. We have sustainable and biofuels. We have ample scope of goods that should be included in the definition of green goods. So the point is just like the forum should add value to what it is already there, and it should create concrete, just like solutions to the tensions between trade and climate change.
Thanks, Eloisa. Jake, Peter, any closing thoughts?
I'm happy. I mean, I didn't really touch upon the choice of forum. You know, whether we need a new one, whether the existing ones could be improved. My own feeling is that the spirit in which the Brazilian presidency is offering the establishment of this new integrated forum is absolutely the right one. I mean, that we want to create a constructive space that is aimed at trying to find practical solutions in an area where we haven't quite been able to set up those conversations in the existing spaces. But I still would really like to see that same spirit being brought into the conversations that Peter mentioned, for example, in the KCI and the Response Measures Forum, in the UNFCCC and the ongoing conversations in the CTE and in parallel in the WTO in Geneva. There's no reason why we can't be constructive and evidence-based and problem-solving in those spaces as well. And by the same token, I worry that if we can't get that kind of political agreement about approaching solutions in this manner, in those fora, I don't know why creating yet another space, bringing the same actors together, is going to necessarily change the tone and the focus of the conversation. So I don't think we should give up on our existing institutions, I guess I would say, and we need to work to bring that same tone of constructiveness and problem solving into those spaces as well. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Jake. Peter, any last words?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with Jake. While we should not give up on existing platforms, but one of the consistent things that we have seen over the years is when the issues are taken up at the UNFCCC, there's a group of views flagging that this should be addressed at the WTO, and at the WTO, so this has gone on for far too long. I think the time has come, if we want to seriously address the climate exigency, the time has come. We need a sort of a something in between, not to replace those existing forums, but somewhere we can have open dialogue, ideas, concrete ideas that can move the discussions forward in both forums, at the WTO and the UNFCCC. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, all of you. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning, and appreciate the time you have devoted to the dialogue thus far. Let me just offer some personal reflections to wrap up here. I am a very strong believer in the value of informal spaces for discussion, precisely as it's been suggested, to help come to some understandings that can then facilitate stronger process within more formal settings. I think these discussions are important to help clarify the issues, to help gain a better understanding of respective perspectives on those issues, and on that basis to begin to scope out some common ground. I've had considerable experience with these kind of informal convenings over the years, but primarily within the climate space, and in a way benefited from the fact that it was pretty clear, focusing on issues alongside the UNFCCC, who you'd want to put around a table. And in the years leading up to the Paris negotiations, for instance, there was a negotiating mandate that provided a high-level agenda. We knew what kinds of issues needed to be discussed. And there was also a negotiating deadline, which really helps to focus the attention of people, and they feel some onus to do the hard work of coming to some common ground. The situation here is somewhat different. The issues, as we've said, straddle different realms. We've not yet achieved an agreed agenda, and there's no particular deadline that we face other than the urgency of sorting out these issues to help address the climate emergency. But I'm really encouraged by the conversations we've had in the dialogue, and the comments we've heard today, recognizing the need and the urgency, and reflecting a real desire to move forward on these issues, to de-escalate, and to build the kind of trust that's required to actually make some good progress here. So let me just conclude by thanking again our speakers, thanking all the participants in the 3 workshops over the past year. Thank all of you for joining us this morning. Encourage you to take a look at the report on the website, and we do look forward to sharing the results of the next round of our dialogue going forward. Thanks to all, and stay in touch.